Daniel and I had been together for 10 years. Our relationship ended abruptly after I answered his phone by mistake. Daniel, our kittens just had a litter, a soft female voice said on the other end. The caller ID simply read kitten. He's taking a shower right now. Call back later, I replied coolly, then hung up. That night, Daniel completely lost it. He frantically gathered his clothes, which were scattered around the bedroom floor, threw them on, and rushed out of our apartment. After he left, I destroyed the home we had shared, methodically removing every sign that I had ever lived there. Then, I booked a flight and left the country. 3 years passed. Daniel found me on a resort island where I was vacationing. He stared hard at the little boy standing beside me, a child who looked somewhat like him. His eyes were red as he asked, his voice tight. Is he mine? It had started on a morning when Daniel seemed full of energy while I felt utterly exhausted, struggling to keep my eyes open. My phone, lying on the nightstand, wouldn't stop ringing. Still half asleep, I reached over and answered it without checking the caller ID. Honey, our kittens just had a new litter, the caller, a woman with a gentle, almost cute voice, announced cheerfully. Her words jolted me wide awake, feeling like a small explosion in my mind. I glanced at the screen. The caller was listed as kitten. Honey? She repeated when I didn't respond immediately. Taking a slow, deep breath to steady myself, I replied calmly, He's in the shower right now. Call back later. There was a brief pause on the other end before she disconnected the call. When Daniel emerged from the bathroom, he had only a towel wrapped around his waist. Water droplets clung to his skin, tracing paths down his muscles before soaking into the fabric. A few fresh red scratch marks were visible on his chest, marks I had made earlier. Why aren't you sleeping in? He asked, his gaze lingering on the similar marks on my collarbone, his eyes darkening slightly. As he leaned closer towards me, I simply held out his phone to him. He frowned, clearly displeased by the interruption, tossed the phone carelessly onto the bed, and pinned my hands above my head, his warm breath brushing against my skin. Our little kittens, I said flatly. He paused, his movement stopping. She called, I continued, to tell you about your kittens. Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes, quickly replaced by a look of panic. He scrambled off the bed, frantically pulling on the clothes he'd discarded earlier, and then bolted out the door without another word. I was left alone in the apartment we shared, watching him run off to be with another woman. I knew who she was. Sophia, his blind date from about 3 months prior. They had apparently grown close very quickly, even adopting a stray cat together, the kittens she had mentioned. She constantly shared things with him, pictures of food she ate, music she liked, even random observations like the shape of a cloud. And he responded to everything she sent. He even sent her pictures of his dinners, carefully cropping me out of the frame if I happened to be there. In stark contrast, Daniel's text messages with me were almost exclusively about work. It was only late at night, tangled together in bed, that he would sometimes whisper the word wife in my ear, a term of endearment I had treasured throughout our 10 years together. A bitter laugh escaped me. I went to the drawer and pulled out Daniel's pack of cigarettes. I didn't usually smoke, and the harsh inhale made me choke and my eyes water. Just then, a text message arrived from my colleague, Maria. Chloe, did you know Daniel is seeing someone else? In front of others, Daniel and I had always maintained a strictly professional demeanor. We often argued about work matters due to differing opinions. No one at the company would ever imagine the moments of tenderness between us, like him teasing me after disagreement, saying something like, "What can you do? You just have to pamper them sometimes." Such interactions were completely hidden from public view. But earlier that day, Daniel had added the new girl, Sophia, to the company's internal group chat. Her introduction read, "Hi everyone, I'm Daniel's assistant, Sophia. Please take care of me." Her nickname in the chat was set to Daniel's kitten. No further explanation was needed. The implication was crystal clear. I wasn't sure how Daniel had explained the phone call I answered, but I soon realized Sophia had started adding everyone in the company as friends on her social media, likely checking to see who was who. Maria sent another text, this one just an eye-roll emoji. "Work is annoying enough as it is," she wrote. "Now I have to deal with being treated like a potential rival." Shortly after that, Sophia made a post on her social media page. It included a picture of a cup of green tea and a caption that read, "Don't touch other people's phones without permission. It's very rude." Daniel had liked the post. With a completely blank expression, I found a baseball bat I kept for emergencies and proceeded to systematically smash everything in the apartment. Furniture splintered, glass shattered, belongings were torn apart. Only when the place was an utter wreck did a grim smile of satisfaction touch my lips. When the professional cleaning crew I called arrived later, they found me sitting dazed on the only piece of furniture left intact, the living room sofa. It wasn't spared because it held any special meaning. I had simply run out of energy by the time I got to it. I was just so incredibly tired. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of the cleaners asked gently, noticing my disheveled appearance in the surrounding chaos. Daniel's chat window was still open on my laptop from a message sent 2 hours before everything imploded. I shook my head slowly and managed a sincere smile. "Please remove all women's items from this apartment." Daniel and I met in college. He came from a privileged background, his future seemingly mapped out for him, a path laid by his family that he only needed to follow, but he possessed a stubborn streak. He broke away from his family's plans, determined to start his own business from scratch. I was his first business partner. He provided the initial funding, and I handled the operational side. I asked him once, "Why did you choose me?" There were plenty of students in our year more capable than I was. He had casually twirled a pen between his fingers, studying me for a moment before offering a genuine smile. "I like you," he'd said simply. His answer had taken me aback. It was the defiant, ambitious spirit within me that had initially attracted him. Later, that same independence became something he seemed to fear or want to control. Sophia was different. She appeared simpler, less ambitious. He had decided that the woman he would eventually marry needed to be a simple girl whose life revolved around him. Daniel was always clear-headed. He knew exactly what he wanted and took decisive action to get it. In some ways, we were alike. Both rebellious, driven, thriving on the edge like predators hunting. This similarity made us formidable partners in the business world. We navigated tricky dinner negotiations and made ruthless decisions that helped our company rise quickly. The night we secured our first major success, our first real fortune, we celebrated, perhaps drinking a bit too much. Later, lying in bed surrounded by scattered celebratory cash, Daniel turned to look at me, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Chloe," he said, his voice low, "you're incredible." I smiled back. "So are you, Daniel." The intense pace of work eventually took its toll, and Daniel fell seriously ill with a high fever. I stayed by his side, tending to him. At one point, delirious with fever, he rolled over, trapping me beneath him. I remember his eyes were bloodshot, his skin flushed and burning hot like a cooked shrimp. "I like you," he murmured again. But this time there was no hesitation, no qualifier. He let go of his usual restraint, his emotions raw, his familiar scent, a mix of tobacco and mint, enveloped me. Soft whimpers turned into deeper moans as his touch ignited something within me, and we sank into each other. After the incident with the phone call and Daniel rushing out, I moved back into my own apartment. Over the years spent mostly at his place, I had apparently pampered myself too much, becoming overly accustomed to his bed. Back in my own place, I found myself unable to sleep, tossing and turning all night. When I returned to the company offices the next day, I happened to run into Daniel near the entrance. I gave him a polite but distant nod. Just then, Sophia jogged over, positioning herself between us. "Hi," she said brightly, then turned to me. "I'm Daniel's fiancé." I nodded back coolly. "Hello." Hearing my voice, her expression flickered for a moment. I didn't engage in further small talk and headed straight for the elevators. "Chloe, right?" Sophia called out, following me, with Daniel trailing behind her. "I've heard Daniel mention you often. You're very capable at work." She paused, then added condescendingly. "However, women shouldn't try to be too prominent in the workplace or spend too much time around men. It doesn't look good. Shopping with friends or getting beauty treatments is much more relaxing. Work should be left to the men." "Right, Daniel?" Daniel reached out and gently ruffled her hair. "Do I dare disagree with you?" he said lightly. Faced with Sophia's blatant provocations, I felt surprisingly little reaction. She had likely recognized my voice from the phone call and was now making a point of displaying her affection for Daniel, staking her claim. In the company, I stated calmly, you will address me as President Thorne. If you find that difficult, I can arrange for the HR department to provide you with appropriate workplace etiquette training. Meals and accommodation will be included. I ignored their reactions and pointedly brushed off the spot on my arm where Sophia had briefly touched me. My dismissive action, however, clearly angered Daniel. After escorting Sophia away, he came directly into my office without knocking. I frowned, displeased. Daniel, knocking is basic courtesy. I emphasized the last few words, deliberately echoing Sophia's earlier condescending tone back at him. He smirked, leaning down and trapping me between his arms and the back of the sofa I was sitting on. You seemed to open the door readily enough for me last night, he murmured, his gaze pointedly dropping to my skirt, the implication clear. Without hesitation, I slapped him hard across the face. A bright red handprint instantly bloomed on his pale cheek. Daniel rubbed his jaw, a humorless smile playing on his lips. He sat down on the chair opposite me. The house in the west side of the city is now registered under your name, he stated coolly. And the paperwork for that plot of land you liked is about to be approved. He half closed his eyes, his expression indifferent. Let's end things on good terms, Chloe. He always knew exactly how to hit my weak spots. It felt like I had handed him the knife, and he had driven it straight into me without a second thought. At that moment, standing over me metaphorically, he reminded me of the various men my mother had brought into our lives over the years, the so-called stepdads. They would profess affection with one hand while trying to buy compliance with money with the other. It was all just a lover's game played under the thin guise of love. Just then, Sophia entered my office carrying a lunchbox, presumably for Daniel. She walked in just as I, in a moment of frustration, splashed the contents of my water glass onto Daniel. Sophia screamed, rushed forward, and slapped me across the face. I have never been the type to passively accept aggression. The only person I had ever allowed to get away with hurting me without retaliation was Daniel. My hand instinctively flew up to strike back, but Daniel grabbed my wrist midair. He pulled Sophia behind him protectively, his voice tight with restrained anger. Chloe, this is not the place for your tantrums. I lifted my other hand and slapped him hard across his other cheek. Seeing the now symmetrical red handprints on Daniel's face brought me a surprising surge of satisfaction. Without Daniel, do you really think a woman like you would be where you are today? Sophia stepped forward, emboldened to defend him. You're fired, I stated flatly. Why? Sophia demanded, tilting her head up, trying to appear imposing. Because I own 30% of the shares in this company, I replied evenly. And because you barged into my private office without permission and assaulted senior management. Sophia started to look panicked, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Seeing that Daniel remained silent, she seemed to regain some courage and continued defiantly. Daniel is the majority shareholder, and I am his fiancée. Who do you think you are? If anyone should leave, it's you. By now, a crowd of employees had gathered at my office door, drawn by the commotion. Daniel's continued silence felt like tacit support for Sophia. There was no point in continuing this argument. Fine, I said calmly. Let's end this. I'll sell my shares to you at the current market price. I turned to Daniel. I believe I've done my utmost for this company and for you. Daniel, who had been quiet throughout the confrontation, finally showed a flicker of surprise, a crack in his cold demeanor when I produced a pre-prepared share transfer agreement from my desk drawer. He probably hadn't expected me to be ready to walk away so completely. Sophia, however, smiled, looking smug and secure in her position as the favored one. Who called the police? Someone asked from the crowd. Covering my face theatrically, I staggered forward slightly. I've been assaulted, I mumbled, pretending to be dizzy. I feel nauseous. After a mandatory checkup at the hospital, the diagnosis was a mild concussion. If I refused to settle the matter privately, Sophia would likely face detention for assault for at least a few days. Daniel smirked knowingly from across the room. He clearly saw through my act. Sophia finally panicked, clinging tightly to Daniel's shirt. Daniel, I don't want to stay here overnight. I'm scared. Daniel softly reassured her, telling her not to be afraid, that he would handle everything. When it came to financial settlements, I wasn't naive either. Outside the police station, Daniel forcefully pulled me into a dark, secluded corner. For money, he hissed. You really have no shame, do you? I grabbed his tie, pulling him hard towards me, so he had no choice but to look me directly in the eye. When you chose to humiliate me publicly to flatter your new girlfriend, I said coldly, you should have expected there would be consequences. Instead of getting angry, Daniel just laughed, pulling me closer by the waist. Tone it down, Chloe, he murmured. No man can handle you when you're like this. I pushed him away in disgust and walked towards the parking lot. As I reached my car, Daniel's voice followed me. You know what my mother is like. Her health hasn't been good these past couple of years, and Sophia fits her idea of a suitable daughter-in-law perfectly. I ignored him, opening my car door. Daniel moved quickly to block it. Chloe, he said, his voice dropping, I can give you anything you want, anything except marriage. Get lost, I spat, slamming the car door shut and driving away quickly. In the rearview mirror, I saw him standing alone, hands shoved in his pockets, his figure silhouetted against the streetlights, his expression unreadable as his shadow stretched long behind him. Back at my apartment, I felt another wave of nausea, likely a lingering effect from the hospital visit, or perhaps just the emotional turmoil. I went straight to bed. The next day, I woke up to a call from my mother. Chloe, you haven't come home for dinner in quite a while, she said. I checked the date on my phone and agreed to come over that evening. When I arrived, a stranger answered the door. Chloe, this is your uncle, my mother introduced him casually. I sighed internally. Another new boyfriend. Unlike the more refined men she had dated in the past, this uncle looked rougher, more down to earth. At the dinner table, my mother eagerly piled food onto my plate. Chloe, she began, your uncle's son just graduated this year. Maybe you could let him help out at your company? Even though I had braced myself for something like this, a wave of sadness washed over me. I quit my job, Mom. What? Why would you quit such a perfectly good job? My mother asked, surprised, putting down her chopsticks. Did you do something to upset Daniel? She thought for a moment before suggesting, maybe you should buy some fruit and go apologize to him. Daniel doesn't seem like the type of person to forget past kindnesses. I slammed my own chopsticks down on the table, the clattering noise echoing in the sudden silence. My mother's eyes immediately filled with tears, and she turned to cry on the new uncle's shoulder. This child has been stubborn ever since she was little, she sobbed. Whenever she gets upset, she breaks things and throws tantrums. If her father hadn't abandoned us, I wouldn't have had to raise her all by myself, enduring all the judgment and sneers from others. Do you think it was easy for me? The uncle comforted my mother, hugging her tightly and assuring her that from now on, she wouldn't have to face these challenges alone. Sure, Mom, I said, my voice cold. You're the only one who's ever had it tough, poor you. I chuckled humorlessly and, without looking back, walked away from the cloying scene of affection behind me. Growing up, feelings of isolation and being bullied were constant companions. My mother had used me as a bargaining chip in her attempts to hold on to my biological father, trying to secure his commitment. Her repeated entanglements and attempts to insert herself into his life only angered his legal wife. As a result, my mother had to drag me from city to city, constantly moving, wandering without a stable home. No one ever truly welcomed our arrival. They always seemed to want something from us or saw us as a burden. Like a stray dog, I learned early on that I had to fight aggressively, chase people away metaphorically, just to protect my own rights and space. To others, I was often dismissed as a petty, fatherless, wild child. Without a man in the house, our little family of an orphan and a widow will just get bullied, my mother used to say. She pinned all her hopes for security and stability on finding a male partner, seeking them out repeatedly. New uncles appeared frequently, almost always with ulterior motives. I remember one year when I was 12, I came home from school to find a drunk man pinning my mother to the ground, hitting her. Seeing the only family I had in the world lying helpless like that ignited a fierce rage in me. I launched myself at the grown man, fighting with all my might. The irrational man pulled out a knife. In that terrifying moment, I felt a strange sense of relief, a fleeting thought that maybe everything could finally end. But my mother threw herself over me, shielding me with her own body, holding me tightly and unwaveringly. Her white blouse slowly soaked through with red. In that moment, I thought perhaps in this life, we are simply destined to torment each other. You've contributed so much to the company over the years. Are you really okay with just walking away like this? Maria, my former colleague whom I had mentored, asked regretfully over drinks one evening. I propped my chin on my hand, taking a slow sip of sake. Okay with it? I mused. A decade of intertwined love and resentment. I had certainly fantasized about a shared future with Daniel, but when faced with an impossible choice, a point of no return, there are often no real winners. Once that line is crossed, the wisest course of action is often to cut your losses and move on. Seeing that I had no intention of reconsidering or going back, Maria started complaining about the situation at the office. To appease Sophia, she explained, Daniel gave her some meaningless executive position where she does basically nothing. But Sophia is paranoid. She's been interrogating every unmarried woman in the company, trying to suss out potential rivals. She even came up with these absurd new workplace assessments and tried to ban women from wearing makeup or skirts at work. It's already driven away multiple important clients. I found this hard to believe. The Daniel I knew, usually so composed and strategic, allowing such madness? Maybe the Daniel I thought I knew was never the real him. Or perhaps his favoritism towards Sophia was a genuine, albeit destructive, exception to his usual character. Regardless, none of it mattered to me anymore. On the day I was scheduled to leave Boston, a light drizzle was falling. My mother, preoccupied with bonding with her new boyfriend's son, hastily ended our brief phone call. Right before I boarded the plane, I received an unexpected call from Ben. He was a childhood friend of Daniel's. We had met a few times over the years, so we weren't complete strangers. I wasn't sure how he found out I was leaving the country. Chloe, he said urgently, you don't need to run off to a foreign country. I've arranged a get-together tonight. Daniel will be there too. Let's just talk things through, clear the air. You guys can still be friends, right? I hung up. When he called back immediately, the call went straight to voicemail. Later, I heard about what happened in the private room where Ben had gathered their friends. Ben clutched his phone, looking troubled after I hung up. The atmosphere in the room apparently dropped to freezing. Daniel's eyes were dark with suppressed anger. It had been his idea for Ben to call me. He had thought that if he showed a hint of weakness or regret, I would soften and reconsider. In his mind, he probably wondered, hadn't he treated me well enough? He had first noticed me because he found me attractive. Later, he claimed to be drawn to my defiant spirit. He remembered the time I publicly questioned the university principal about the fairness of scholarship distribution while standing on the award stage. My small figure challenging the established rules. Daniel acknowledged I was exceptional, but Boston wasn't lacking in talented people. He had provided me with resources and connections, helping elevate me to my current position. He had even made our relationship public among his close circle of friends. What more could I possibly be dissatisfied with? That was likely his line of thinking. Daniel, if you really can't let her go, then just go get her back. Ben, who had recently lost his own wife and perhaps had a clearer perspective on loss, sincerely advised him. Daniel irritably lit a cigarette, scoffing dismissively. It was just a fling. She really thinks she's something special. On the surface, Daniel maintained an air of indifference, but his recent erratic behavior apparently exposed his bluff. For instance, he deliberately tolerated Sophia's disruptive antics at the company, likely hoping the news would reach me and provoke a reaction. He frequently inquired about my whereabouts through mutual contacts and was seen lingering near my apartment building, though he never approached me directly. Ben had advised him several times to confront his true feelings, but Daniel refused. What right did I have to defy him? I only mattered because of his affection, or so he believed. He felt he could give me everything, and therefore, he could also take it all away. Now that his relationship with his own family had improved, he just needed to say the word and people would scramble to do his bidding. How would a calculating person like me handle losing everything? He was apparently waiting for that day, the day I, with nowhere else to turn, would humble myself before him. Then, perhaps out of lingering sentiment for our past, he might reluctantly take me back. After I turned off my phone before boarding the plane, I finally felt a sense of peace. For the past 27 years of my life, I had been constantly rushing, never daring to stop or slow down. It always felt like stopping would mean being abandoned by the world, left behind. Chloe, what are you actually chasing? I asked myself silently. My heart felt strangely empty, offering no answers. They say that at the edge of the world, those who witness the aurora borealis can have their deepest wishes granted. After landing in a country in northern Europe known for the lights, I found a small, cozy inn to stay in. Daniel and I had actually come here once before on a business trip, but it had been snowing heavily then, and we had to return quickly without seeing the lights. Many other travelers with similar hopes of seeing the aurora frequented this area, and coincidentally, several of them were also staying at the same inn. Some were groups of friends, some were families, and some were couples. We all sort of naturally formed a spontaneous sightseeing group. This small town lacked skyscrapers and bustling city life. Instead, it offered views of endless snowy mountains and deep fjords. The sunset painted the white mountain peaks with a warm glow. A plane, taking off in the twilight sky, stirred up flocks of seagulls, their calls echoing melodiously in the crisp air. As night fell, clouds gathered, obscuring most of the stars. But hope remained. Someone suggested we should actively chase the lights, driving to areas with clearer skies. A few of us rented a car and hired a local guide, an aurora hunter, to embark on this somewhat childish adventure. The car drove through the dark, quiet night until a faint glimmer appeared on the distant horizon. "It's the Northern Lights!" someone cheered excitedly. A breathtaking burst of light erupted across the sky, seeming to blend the heavens and the water below, piercing through the layers of mountains in the distance. It was a sight that struck the soul. "Why aren't you making a wish?" someone asked me gently. I found myself at a loss for words. Perhaps I used to have many wishes. For example, I wished my mother could show a little more genuine care for me. And for many years, I wished for a long and happy future with Daniel. But at that moment, standing under the ethereal glow, I couldn't form a single wish. "I hope my mom gets better." A young man standing beside me prayed sincerely, his hands clasped tightly. I mirrored his gesture, clasping my own hands together, and silently wished, "Let me be healthy, and may all my future wishes come true." Later, gathered around a bonfire, travelers held steaming mugs of hot cocoa, sharing their stories and reasons for being there. Some wished for lifelong love with their partners. Others carried heavy burdens, praying for the safety and health of their families, seeing the aurora as a last hope. I had never felt so peaceful, so completely immersed in the present moment. In my past life, my mind was constantly occupied with calculations, weighing pros and cons, analyzing risks, confirming the potential return on investment for every action. Allowing myself to be emotional had always felt like a dangerous luxury. Because I knew from experience that if you fall into an abyss, no one is likely to pull you out. They might even step on you to climb higher themselves. Daniel's presence in my life had allowed me brief moments of respite, brief periods where I felt safe enough to explore the emotional territory I usually dared not touch. I had repeatedly revealed my flaws to him, my complicated family background, my insecurities, my less sightly aspects. Partly to test him, partly to scare him away, to show him I wasn't a worthwhile investment. But he had persistently pursued me, affirming every part of me, only to eventually tear it all down, shattering everything into pieces. He had stabbed me in the heart again and again. It was agonizingly painful, yet, strangely, there was an exhilarating sense of release in the finality of it. The falling snow seemed to embrace me. The tears that welled in my eyes froze into tiny ice crystals on my lashes. I spread my arms wide, moving slowly, immersing myself in a solitary dance with the falling snowflakes, responding to an imagined comfort. "It's no big deal, Chloe," I whispered to myself. Dense clouds rolled in, obscuring the lights completely. People sighed in disappointment. "What bad luck," someone muttered. "It's starting to snow heavily. Let's head back." On the drive back to the inn, disaster struck unexpectedly. The car hit a patch of ice, skidded, and overturned several times, rolling down an embankment. Everything outside the windows became a blur of white. "An avalanche!" someone screamed. Sounds of terror, panicked blame, and self-pity filled the small, crushed space. I had often daydreamed about what it would be like to have a normal family outing, perhaps to an amusement park. I imagined wearing a pretty bow in my hair, riding high on my father's shoulders, letting go of all my defensive prickles, and acting like a real child. Maybe pointing at a stuffed toy and saying, "Mom, I want that one." But trapped in the overturned car, facing the real possibility of death, I realized how fragile and often conditional human connections are, whether family, friendship, or love. Just like now, the initial grievances and blame inside the car quickly turned into mutual encouragement. "We're all going to make it out of this," someone shouted, and everyone began working together, trying desperately to break the windows and find a way out. Before this shared trauma, we were strangers. Because of this journey, we found ourselves encouraging each other. And after today, if we survived, mountains and rivers would separate us again, making us mere passers-by in each other's lives once more. After being rescued hours later, I lay limp on the snowy ground, exhausted but alive. Using my finger, I drew a small, simple sun in the soft snow beside me, a mark that belonged only to Chloe. Iterations and replacements might erase my traces from the world, but I was truly here. I had existed. To love someone else, you must first love yourself. When trapped in the mud, only self-reliance truly works. I think my own journey, the journey of discovering myself, has just begun. Meanwhile, back in Boston, at Daniel's mother's birthday banquet, Sophia stood beside the matriarch, wearing an elegant dark blue dress. The guests were all wealthy or influential members of society. Daniel stood apart from the crowd near the edge of the ballroom, staring blankly at the night sky, seeming detached from the surrounding festivities. People milled around, holding champagne glasses, offering congratulations. "Congrats, Daniel, on finding such a beauty," someone said, slapping him on the back. Yes, it was also supposed to be the grand occasion of his official engagement to Sophia. People assumed Daniel was overjoyed, noting how he drank glass after glass of champagne. Later, thoroughly drunk, Daniel pulled Sophia into a hug, but witnesses heard him murmuring my name. "Chloe." Maria sent me a video of the incident later. It apparently caused a huge commotion. Sophia left the party in tears. Daniel's father was reportedly furious, struck him, and had him sent straight to the hospital to recover. "Chloe, I had no idea you and Daniel had that kind of history," Maria told me apologetically over the phone later. "I kept mentioning Sophia and her antics to you all the time. You must have been feeling so awful back then." I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. "It's all in the past now, Maria." Up to that point, I finally understood. Daniel had never truly seen me as his equal. Maybe he had some genuine feelings for me, but they were limited, conditional. He could agree to be with Sophia to satisfy his family's interests and expectations, while simultaneously using underhanded tactics to try and force me back under his control. He believed he had lifted me up to my current position, and therefore he felt entitled to take it all away. My properties were mysteriously frozen by legal maneuvers. Most of my liquid funds and stock investments vanished due to actions he likely initiated. I remembered a text message he had sent late one night after I left. "Come back to me, Chloe, and it's all yours again." Using intimidation and temptation had been one of the ruthless tactics we employed together in the business world. Now, he was using it against me, someone who had once fought alongside him. I smiled faintly, removed the SIM card from my phone, snapped it in half, and tossed it into the nearest trash bin. Against the light filtering through the window, I turned and headed towards my next unknown destination. In the hospital back in Boston, Daniel lay wrapped in bandages. His assistant stood beside the bed, nervously reporting updates. Ever since the boss had publicly called out Chloe's name at his own engagement party, he had become a different person. He, who used to be so calm and controlled, now had a dangerously short temper. The entire office staff was walking on eggshells. They were almost constantly in communication with contacts overseas, monitoring everything Chloe did abroad, reporting every small detail back to Daniel. She went missing, sir," the assistant reported hesitantly. "There was an avalanche, buried under the snow. She's listed as lost." Daniel's heart seemed to stop for a beat, his eyes losing focus. Before the assistant could finish speaking, a water glass flew from Daniel's hand, narrowly missing the assistant's head and shattered against the wall. Daniel went berserk. Ignoring his still healing broken ribs, he tried to force himself out of bed, bracing himself on the frame, insisting he had to go investigate personally. The updates he received over the next few days were consistent. She was still missing. The international news reported on the incident, a small town in Western Europe hit by a major avalanche due to extreme weather, numerous tourists trapped, rescue efforts ongoing but hampered by conditions. She'll be fine, Daniel kept telling himself, shaking his head frantically. She's clever. She'll have found a way to hide, to survive. Disregarding all medical advice, Daniel ordered his private jet to be prepared immediately. He wanted to fly to Northern Europe as quickly as possible and bring her back himself. But he didn't even make it out of the hospital building before his family's security team intercepted him and dragged him back to his room. To prevent him from worsening his injuries, his mother made the difficult decision to have him sedated and temporarily restrained to the bed. She had never seen her son so irrational, so completely manic. Daniel had brought me home to meet his mother once. She hadn't approved. I wasn't from a suitable background, carried too much emotional baggage from my past, and had a heavy heart, as she put it. His mother had seen women like me around her own husband over the years and didn't want her son entangled in the same kind of complicated relationship. "Mom, please, just let me go find her." Daniel, looking emaciated and frail in the hospital bed, pleaded with his mother. His mother eventually softened, promising her son that as soon as he recovered sufficiently, she would use all the family's resources to help find me. The Evan family did use all their connections, launching an extensive private search, but found no trace of me. The only things their investigators recovered from the small inn where I had stayed were a personal journal and a medical report confirming a pregnancy. The report indicated I was over 3 months pregnant at the time of my disappearance. Daniel's eyes turned bloodshot, and his fingers trembled uncontrollably as he opened the journal. "Daniel," the entry began, "you once told me that lovers who witness the aurora together are destined to meet again in the next life. It's a pity we never got to see it together. And now, it seems we've lost each other in this life too. I brought the baby to see it, though. The aurora is truly beautiful, Daniel. If you were here, you would surely be amazed by nature's wonders too." "I'm pregnant," another entry read. "Despite all your precautions, this new life arrived unexpectedly. Could it be destiny's way of trying to keep us connected somehow? I had planned to come back to tell you about the baby. Even though I grew up wary and hardened by my environment, at this moment, I find myself shamefully thinking of using this child as a way to keep you. The news about your engagement to Sophia reached me just as I was about to book my return ticket. It canceled everything. Everything I've seen and experienced on this journey, even the simplest things like the shape of a cloud, I find myself wanting to share with you. In the past, I wouldn't have dared to think like this. I was always acutely aware of the gap between our worlds, which is why I never stopped pushing myself, grinding relentlessly until I felt I had earned the right, the courage to stand by your side. The snow is closing in, devouring everything. It seems the baby and I might never make it back. Fate appears to have decided that we were never truly meant to be together." Daniel, lying in the hospital bed reading these words, was already sobbing uncontrollably. The journal entries abruptly stopped on February 20th, the date of our 10th anniversary together. The very last line read, "Daniel, wishing you a happy marriage and many children." Daniel stared blankly out the hospital window, looking like a hollowed-out version of himself. In the following days and weeks, he obsessively replayed every memory he had of me. They had spent 10 years together. 10 years filled with countless shared days and nights, intertwined struggles and triumphs, mutual support and deep connection. He realized, too late, that he had fallen far deeper in love with me than he had ever acknowledged, even to himself. It wasn't just a physical connection, it was a profound spiritual bond. Spending just a few days interacting solely with Sophia made him understand clearly. What he truly needed wasn't someone gentle and compliant whose life revolved around him. What he needed, what he craved, was someone who, with just a shared glance, understood him completely, someone who would overcome 1,000 obstacles to stay in sync with him. But he had lost her, and, he believed, he had lost their child too. What had he been doing when I disappeared? Oh, right. He was busy getting engaged to someone else. The thought pierced his heart with unbearable pain, a grief so profound it felt like it might actually kill him. Evan lay in bed for days, kept alive only by intravenous nutrient drips. Ben visited him a few times and seeing his friend wasting away couldn't help but curse him. What the hell were you doing before all this? What kind of act are you putting on now that she's dead? Hearing Ben's harsh words, Daniel struggled weakly to sit up, his body too frail to muster much force. She's not dead, he rasped. She's not dead. She and the baby are fine. If Daniel hadn't looked so close to death himself, Ben probably would have physically attacked him. Then go find her, Ben retorted. What's the point of this dying act? Hearing this, it was as if Daniel received a shot of adrenaline. He demanded someone bring him food and began shoving it into his mouth recklessly. His stomach, already weakened by neglect, couldn't handle it, and he ended up kneeling on the floor, vomiting profusely. Seeing some signs of improvement, Sophia came to visit him in the hospital. Although she was somewhat bothered by the dramatic events surrounding Chloe's disappearance and Daniel's reaction, she likely figured there was no point in competing with a dead person. Besides, in the aristocratic circles she belonged to, it was common for couples in arranged or advantageous marriages to live largely separate lives. Daniel was handsome, came from a wealthy and influential family, and she did have some genuine feelings for him. On the bright side, she probably thought affection could grow over time. On the practical side, having grown up observing the dynamics of high society, she likely felt equipped to handle the complexities. As long as she eventually had a child with him, her future position would be secure. However, as soon as Sophia walked into his hospital room, Daniel lunged at her, grabbing her throat tightly. If it weren't for you, he choked out, his voice filled with rage, she wouldn't have taken the child and gone abroad. How dare you show your face in front of me? It's your fault she's gone. His grip tightened, and Sophia couldn't even cry out for help. Daniel seemed to have gone completely mad. If his mother hadn't arrived at that exact moment, the consequences could have been unthinkable. Daniel's father was furious about the incident and ordered him to be sent to a private facility for closed psychiatric treatment. Daniel recovered physically while patiently biding his time, planning his escape. One day, during a staff shift change, he saw his opportunity and made his move. He snuck out of the facility, determined to find the woman he had lost. He began searching the endless snow-covered mountains of northern Europe year after year. 3 years later, I'm relaxing on a beach chair on a sunny island in the southern hemisphere. Nearby, a small boy waves a chubby hand towards me and pleads, "Buy me an ice cream, pretty please?" The young man currently applying sunscreen to my back chuckles. "Call me Daddy," he teases the boy, "and I'll buy you one." "Don't spoil him," I warn lightly. "He'll just complain about a toothache later tonight." Before I could finish my sentence, the two of them were already running off happily towards the ice cream stand. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly, put on my sunglasses, and settled back to soak in the sun. Suddenly, the skin on my back tightened. The pressure of the hand moving across my shoulders increased significantly, becoming rougher. I frowned in displeasure. "Gentler," I murmured. The breathing behind me seemed to grow heavier, but I didn't pay it much attention, assuming it was just the young man returning. Then, a warm palm pressed forcefully down along my spine, hitting a particularly sensitive spot about 3 inches above my lower back. I couldn't control the involuntary cry that escaped my lips. Fortunately, the beach wasn't very crowded at that moment. I angrily twisted my head around, coming face to face with Daniel. His expression was a mask barely containing intense rage. He looked thinner than I remembered, and dark circles under his eyes suggested chronic lack of rest. "Do you have any idea how long I've been looking for you?" Daniel choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought you were really—" "What?" I interrupted coolly, regaining my composure. "Unhappy to find out I'm still alive?" Daniel's eyes turned red as he stared at me intensely, his voice trembling with an uncontrollable sadness. I thought I couldn't find you anywhere on Earth. I figured I might as well go search in hell." He swallowed hard. "If someone hadn't mentioned seeing a woman matching your description here, you would never have seen me again." "So what?" I retorted flatly. "Do you think you're some kind of irreplaceable treasure? I stood up expressionlessly, intending to walk away, but Daniel grabbed my wrist tightly, pulling me forcefully into his arms. "I've been looking for you for 3 years, Chloe," he cried, his voice breaking. 3 whole years. All I had was that notebook of yours to get me through those cold, endless nights. He buried his face in my hair. "I gave up everything for you, even knowing you deceived me about the baby, about everything." My pathetic heart still softened when I read those words. "I just want us to go back to how we were before." Isn't my sincerity enough? How could you treat my feelings like this? Daniel's eyes reddened further as he yelled, his voice filled with anguish. "Chloe, do you even have a heart?" As Daniel and I struggled, the little boy returned unnoticed. He jabbed the 2 ice cream cones he was holding directly onto Daniel's knees, the sticky ice cream immediately melting into the fabric of his expensive suit pants. "Big bully!" the child shouted. "Let go of her!" Daniel glanced down at the child, whose features bore a slight passing resemblance to his own. A flicker of unexpected tenderness crossed his eyes. "Mine?" he asked again, his voice barely a whisper. Before I could respond, the child called out towards the ice cream stand in the distance. "Daddy, come quick, there's a bad man here." Daniel's face darkened instantly. He bit out through gritted teeth. "You let my son call someone else daddy?" Just then, Liam, the young man who had been with me earlier, rushed back. Seeing the situation, he immediately punched Daniel squarely on the mouth. Daniel wiped away the trickle of blood from his split lip with the back of his hand and waved off his own bodyguards, who started moving forward. "Chloe, come back with me," Daniel pleaded, ignoring Liam, "or I swear I'll kill this man." Liam's youthful pride flared up instantly. "You dare threaten me?" he shot back. Liam's own security team, never far away, closed in upon hearing his shout. They clearly had the manpower advantage, and I had no desire to get caught in the middle of a physical confrontation. "Our child is gone, Daniel," I stated flatly, deciding not to elaborate further. I took the little boy's hand and turned to leave. Daniel and his bodyguards tried to follow, but Liam's security team effectively blocked their path. "Don't go, Chloe!" Daniel's desperate shouts echoed behind me. "You said you loved me in that diary. That diary, I don't believe it was all lies." 3 years ago, I knew I was being constantly watched, my every step potentially obstructed by Daniel's influence. So, I had bribed certain contacts to ensure my whereabouts remained hidden and arranged for that journal, along with the fabricated pregnancy report, to be found and delivered to Daniel, a significant parting gift. I wanted him to remember me always, to be haunted by the thought of how our supposed child had hopelessly died while he was busy celebrating his engagement to Sophia. I deliberately amplified his guilt, ensuring that every time he might reach for happiness in the future, that guilt would forever haunt him. The contents of the diary were a carefully constructed mix of truth and fiction. The child with me now? His mother was a business partner of mine. I had agreed to be the boy's godmother. Daniel, still unwilling to give up completely, apparently managed to secretly obtain a sample of the child's hair for DNA testing later on. The results, confirming no biological link, devastated him. He was forced to finally accept the truth I had constructed. Our child was gone while he had been preparing to marry Sophia. He didn't return to his family home after that revelation, but somehow discovered my new address and business location. Unlike the near impossible task of finding me 3 years prior, when I actively sought anonymity, I wasn't surprised he could locate me now. I had long since moved on and was no longer hiding. It had been 3 years. "Chloe, just give me a chance to make it up to you, please." Daniel blocked my path outside my office building one day. The arrogant, untouchable man I once knew, the man who held so much power, now seemed diminished, pleading. I paused, looking at the man who had once stood beside me as an equal, now regarding him with cool indifference. If everything could simply be compensated for or fixed, I asked quietly, then what meaning did the desperate, cornered version of me from 3 years ago even have? I paused, then echoed the words he had once said to me. "Daniel, we're both adults. Let's try to maintain some dignity. End things well." Daniel tried to step forward again, but my assistant, Alex, moved smoothly to block him. "Sir," Alex said, his voice gentle yet firm, carrying an unmistakable air of authority, "please show some respect." Alex continued calmly. If you continue to harass Miss Thorne, we will be forced to take legal action to have you deported. Alex then opened the back door of my car, carefully shielding my head with his hand as I got in. Daniel stared at Alex's overly familiar protective actions, his teeth audibly gritting. "And just who are you?" he demanded. After closing the car door securely, Alex turned back to Daniel and handed him his business card. "I am Chloe Thorne's personal assistant, Alex Ryder," he stated calmly. "If you have any legitimate matters to discuss with Miss Thorne, please schedule an appointment through me first." The car pulled away smoothly. Glancing back, I saw Daniel standing frozen on the sidewalk, clenching his fists, staring hard in our direction. I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. "I didn't know you were so good at annoying people, Alex," I teased him in the passenger seat. "You're usually so quiet and well-behaved." Alex's face remained expressionless. "It's part of my job, Miss Thorne." "Not very fun," I remarked, turning my attention to some paperwork on my lap. Out of my line of sight, Alex glanced briefly at the rearview mirror, his own fist tightening for a moment before relaxing. Thanks to Alex's efficient efforts in managing my schedule and communications, I rarely encountered Daniel anymore. I appreciated his competence immensely and showed my gratitude by giving him a 2% raise on his annual year-end bonus. Alex, still displaying no outward emotion, simply placed a cup of warm brown sugar water and a disposable warming patch on my desk later that day. I smacked my forehead lightly, suddenly realizing why I had been feeling so irritable lately. My period had arrived. I flopped onto the sofa in my office lounge area as Alex quietly set a thermal container with a meal in front of me. "Why isn't this from my usual lunch place?" I asked, slightly pouting. Alex calmly took out utensils and a spoon from a separate bag and handed them to me. "I made this chicken soup myself," he stated simply. "You shouldn't eat takeout for the next few days." I pouted again. It was hard to refuse something he had personally prepared. "But I'm supposed to be on a diet right now," I protested weakly. Just as I was feeling conflicted, Alex had already ladled a bowl of the steaming soup and handed it to me. "I skimmed all the oil off the top," he said softly. "It won't make you gain weight." I couldn't help but remark, "Whoever ends up marrying you is going to have to celebrate for 3 days and nights straight." Alex watched me drink the soup, an unreadable expression in his eyes. His lips moved as if he was about to say something, but he was interrupted by two childish voices shouting, Aunt Chloe, Aunt Chloe! Chloe, I came to see you!" The little boy and Liam burst into my office lounge. Alex quickly moved to intercept them, catching them steadily before they could crash into me. "Aunt Chloe, can you take me to the amusement park?" the little boy pleaded, clinging to my leg. I clutched my stomach, which was giving a faint ache, and forced a smile. "How about another day, sweetie? Aunt Chloe isn't feeling very well today." Seeing this, the little boy's eyes lit up with a mischievous gleam. "Ooh, do I have a little sister coming soon?" His chubby face rubbed against my stomach playfully. "Aunt Chloe, did you agree to give Uncle Liam a baby sister?" "Me?" I glared pointedly at Liam, who was standing awkwardly to the side. Alex stood up, lifted the little boy easily by the collar of his shirt, and carried him out of the room. "Uncle Alex has some new summer homework books for you," I heard him say. When Alex returned, I had just finished lecturing Liam about not causing trouble or putting ideas into the kid's head. Alex saw Liam reaching for the remaining chicken soup and quickly snatched the container away. "Alex, what's your problem?" Liam frowned, clearly frustrated. Alex's face remained cold, but a slight smirk touched his lips. "This soup," he stated flatly, "will make you impotent." The next time I saw Daniel was unavoidable in my company's main conference room. He was representing a client company. As a professional, I don't accept handouts or charity, but I certainly won't refuse legitimate business opportunities that I've earned. Daniel maintained a strictly business-like demeanor throughout the meeting, and I couldn't find any fault with his conduct. However, Liam became increasingly difficult. He started camping out in my office almost every day under the guise of learning the business. Wherever I went, he seemed to follow, but there wasn't much I could do about it directly. He had a distant family connection to one of my major business partners. Liam, who is half Chinese and half English, was the youngest in his wealthy family, a beloved little prince, thoroughly pampered by everyone around him. After countless interruptions during project meetings I had with Daniel's client team, my patience finally snapped, and I lost my temper with Liam. He looked stunned for a moment, his European almond-shaped eyes filling with hurt. "It won't happen again," he mumbled. And for a while, he actually kept his promise. He stopped wearing his usual leather jackets and switched to tailored suits. He even started styling his shoulder-length hair back with gel, trying to look more mature. Dressed up, he did manage to look the part. One day, Liam dropped a contract on my desk, protesting, "I'm not a kid anymore, Chloe. I've grown up." Something must have set him off again. He had apparently run back home, taken over one of his family's subsidiary companies, and now wanted to discuss a potential business partnership with me. When it came to actual work discussions, he quickly became drowsy or complained of hunger. But anything related to Daniel immediately put him on high alert, like a vigilant guard dog, his eyes narrowing with clear hostility. Though I felt slightly uneasy about his intensity, I mostly chalked it up to the tantrums of a spoiled young man. This continued until the celebration party for the successful completion of the project involving Daniel's client. Daniel clinked glasses with me, his eyes holding a deep, unreadable expression. "Chloe," he said, his voice low, "we still work so well together. We're practically a match made in heaven." He hadn't even finished speaking when the ballroom lights dimmed unexpectedly, and a soft, romantic symphony began to play. When the spotlights came back on, Liam was walking towards me, holding a large bouquet of Ecuadorian roses. He knelt dramatically on one knee and presented a diamond ring. "Chloe," he declared loudly, "will you marry me?" I quickly pulled him up to his feet and whispered urgently, "Liam, are you crazy? I'm 11 years older than you." Liam held onto my hand tightly, his voice sounding genuinely hurt. "Do you think I'm too young? I told you, I've grown up. I can be mature and responsible." I sighed and gently pushed his hand away. "Oh, you don't need to change yourself for anyone, Liam. I see you as a playful younger brother." Liam's eyes dimmed briefly at my words, but then filled with renewed hope. "Then just get used to seeing me as your boyfriend instead." Before I could figure out how to respond firmly enough to make him give up, Alex appeared beside me, draped his own suit coat over my shoulders, and smoothly led me off the stage and out of the ballroom. Back at my villa later that night, I let out a long sigh of relief. Alex brought me a cup of calming herbal tea, then stood behind my chair, gently massaging my temples with his thumbs. "Thanks, Alex," I murmured gratefully. "It's part of my job, Miss Thorne," he replied quietly. My phone rang. It was my business partner, the little boy's mother. I pouted and answered the call. "Stop teasing me," I grumbled. "I'm losing my mind over here." "Mike," she laughed, using his English name, "is half German, half English, 187 centimeters tall and worth millions. Why can't you see he's perfect for you?" "I'm 11 years older than him," I argued back. Just then, Liam's voice burst through the phone line from her end. "I'm not a kid, Chloe. I really like you. I really, really like you." He was cut off by the boy's mother, who continued smoothly. "He's 19, Chloe. It's different over here. People can legally get married at that age. If you're worried about his family, don't be. They're very open-minded and will support whatever Mike wants. Even if you end up breaking his heart, his family can handle it. He hasn't coerced me into saying this, by the way. It's just the truth. You're 30, still in your prime. It's the perfect time to take some risks." I firmly declined Liam's proposal again, both to him and his family intermediary. But he refused to take no for an answer, continuing to hang around my company under the pretense of discussing business, constantly clashing with Daniel whenever their paths crossed. So I started trying my best to avoid both of them, letting Alex handle most external meetings and communications. Alex always managed things impeccably, granting me a welcome period of relative peace. But those good days didn't last long. One evening, Daniel got drunk and caused a scene outside my home. "Chloe," he yelled up at my window, "what will it take for you to forgive me? I'll give you everything I have, everything. Just come home with me." Unfortunately, Liam was also there that night, apparently trying to intercept Daniel, and started causing trouble too. "Nobody would even want to throw your trash in the garbage," Liam shouted at Daniel. Then he turned towards my window. "Chloe, don't take his trash. Take mine. I'm clean." I pinched the bridge of my nose in exasperation, peeling off the face mask I had just applied. Resisting the strong urge to go down and slap both of them, I made a call to Liam's family security detail to come pick up their drunken young master. The argument outside my door continued unabated. Daniel didn't really see Liam as a serious rival. He was far more wary of my quiet, efficient assistant, Alex. He firmly believed that I wouldn't be interested in loud, immature punks like Liam. In terms of both personality and capability, Daniel knew he was far more stable and accomplished than someone like Liam, who still lived largely off his family's wealth. Old and washed up, and you're still scoffing? Liam snapped back, irritated by Daniel's dismissive smirk. Being called old clearly touched a sore spot for Daniel, and his anger flared, fueled by the alcohol. I dated Chloe for 10 years, Daniel retorted drunkenly, and we even had a child together. He paused, freezing for a moment, as if the fight had suddenly drained out of him, replaced by resignation. But you didn't manage to keep her heart, did you? Liam shot back immediately. Just shows how lousy you are. He shoved Daniel hard, causing him to stumble and fall to the ground. When I opened my front door slightly, Liam's security had just arrived to take their young master away. I had never seen Daniel look so utterly dejected. He remained sitting there on the ground, his eyes filled with despair as he looked up at me. "Chloe, did you know?" Daniel said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "I've been looking for you for the past 3 years, and I often dream. I dream of that child, crying so miserably, waving at me, asking why I abandoned them." His voice broke. "It tears my heart apart every time. I'm sorry, Chloe. I am so truly sorry for what I did to you, for everything." Daniel covered his face with one hand, trying to shield what little dignity he had left, but tears still seeped through his fingers. I sighed, a deep weariness settling over me. "Go back, Daniel. Don't look for me anymore. We can't go back to what we had." Thinking of the once high-spirited, confident man he used to be, now so clearly tormented after 3 years of searching and regret, I noticed strands of silver prematurely threading through his jet-black hair. He was barely in his early 30s. My heart felt heavy, but I knew this entanglement had to end cleanly, decisively. Daniel suddenly dropped to his knees on the pavement, clutching at the hem of my clothes like a drowning man. "Please, Chloe," he begged, his voice raw. "Just give me one more chance. I'm ruined because of you. Have pity on me. Forgive me, please." I didn't turn around. My silence was the only answer I could give. Making the same devastating mistake twice was more than enough for one lifetime. Regret wouldn't change the past, but we could still choose to look forward. Unable to contain his overwhelming emotions under the harsh glare of the streetlight, Daniel clutched his shirt over his heart, curling into a ball in the corner by my gate, letting out gut-wrenching sobs. He could only watch as the woman he loved walked away, never looking back. Once he thought that separation by death was the most painful thing imaginable. Now he realized that meeting someone again, being close enough to touch yet knowing they were completely out of reach, was a far more excruciating form of torture. The person walking away was the precious gold he had discovered in his youth. But now, that gold no longer belonged to him. It had completely and irrevocably abandoned him. Even without his support, without his resources, the gold still shone brightly, perhaps even more brilliantly on its own, irresistibly drawing attention. He finally had to admit it. Chloe was perfectly fine without him. He had never been her only source of strength or success. In this painful, lingering entanglement, he was the only one left standing still, forever anchored in the past, unable to move on.